Silicon Valley, a place where passionate entrepreneurs and savvy investors have created more wealth and innovation than ever before seen on this planet. There's so much mythology surrounding this tiny yet influential place that it can be hard to tell fiction from fact. I'm George Soto, and this is Startups Unedited. In this episode, we sit down with my good friend Gretchen DeKnikker, who's currently COO at SaaStr, which is an early-stage venture fund and startup community. She's been in this game for over 18 years and was a first hire at companies such as E01, which is now part of Adobe. And you can imagine when she joined, she was the first non-technical hire. So this means she did everything from like sales, marketing, business development. If it was non-technical, she did it. And what's even more impressive was that there were 0 customers when she joined, and now they're part of a very large public company. She's been at 6 startups over the years, of which 1 she was a founder at. We sat down and got passionate and excited and a little emotional. What was her take on this entire startup ecosystem and the whole founder experience? Check it out. We've been meeting with investors and founders and others in the startup ecosystem here in San Francisco, really asking questions around like, what is it really like to be a founder in San Francisco? You see the media and how they portray it. You see like, HBO, which is a great show, but you saw, there was a show on, I forgot the name of it, but I think it was Silicon Valley on Bravo.
Bravo one, yeah.
I mean, come on, right? So, it's been interesting what we've heard so far, but why don't you take a second to kind of introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your professional background.
Sure, I'm Gretchen DeKnikker. I'm currently the COO of SaaStr, but I've been doing the enterprise software thing since 1998, so like back in the last century. I'm practically an artifact. This is my 6th startup. 1 turn as a founder, 5 as an employee. Yeah.
What is the most challenging thing that I think we as founders have to deal with when trying to launch an idea and get to like even just a place where someone could use the product?
I think the hardest part, and I wish if someone gave me this advice that I heard it, people probably did and I just didn't hear it. But I think the hardest part for me was like in the first 2 years, if someone had said, you're doing great if things aren't working every day, you rule a few more things out, right? Like I felt like, as a founder, you feel like you're failing every day anyway, but especially with the product in the first 2 years of feeling like, now with looking back, I'm like, no, you were just ruling out all the things that wouldn't work that was actually whittling down to what the product would be, what the path would be, what the features would be, all of those things, right? But every day I was just like, we're idiots. We are idiots and we're not getting anywhere and we're just coming up with more stupid ideas. And if I could just reframe it, and when I do this again, I will have it reframed of like, no, this is just one more thing that's not gonna work on the path to finding this perfect little groove that we're looking for. I wish I'd known that part. When do you know to walk? When do you know that you put in, a year plus maybe 2-3 years? This sometimes these things take a while to fail. When do you know it's enough is enough? I don't think as a founder, you ever feel that way. I think the bank account tells you, right? But I don't think as a founder, you're like, this isn't working, I need to go. I guess, obviously some people feel that way and they do that. For me, I can't imagine ever getting there. Like if you gave me more money, I would go back and work on my idea more right now. Yeah. Right? Like I would still want to make it work. I'm still that passionate about it, and we shut the company down 2 years ago. Yeah. Right? If you said you can go back tomorrow and you can start just where you left off, I would do it. Knowing all the things that I know anyway,
and it still hasn't been solved, okay?
Right, so, yeah. They're probably, right, like there's still a market maybe, totally. Or we were idiots and we'll always have been idiots, but I think someone will solve the problem. Mm-hmm.
When do you know, hey, this is time, like this is the moment for me to take that leap of faith, leave the stable thing and take this risk?
I think, well, if you have like a standard 9 to 5, my personal recommendation would be go work for a startup first. And just get a feel for, is this level of ambiguity and uncertainty and just a little bit of chaos every day, is that even something that's comfortable for me, right? Like you might decide that the predictable 9 to 5 is a better choice for you. Some people would disagree with that, and they would say, if you have an idea and you really want to go do it, go be a founder. And I think if you do have something that you're really, really, really passionate about and you're driven to go do it, then just go do it. But if you're kind of like, I wonder what being a founder would be like, go be an employee, a really early employee, and get like a lot of the feel for it, and then decide, especially if you're not like pulled by something.
I mean, I agree with you, and that I wouldn't have agreed maybe like 10 years ago or something, because I would have been like, no, I can do anything. Like, there is something to be said about leadership, I think, and understanding how to build an organization and operate a thing.
Right.
And that's distinctly different than like building an app.
Right.
Can we unpack that for a second?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting because when you think about starting a company, you think primarily about the product and your market and all of those things, right? But you don't think about, oh, and I'm gonna be learning how to be a CEO while I'm a CEO, right? Like, there's no other job in the world where you kind of train for it as you're going along, and it's actually not, and it's your side gig almost, right? Like, you thought, I was just gonna be a founder, I'm gonna bring this company to market, and then there's this secondary thing of, oh shit, and I need to be a great leader, I need to get these investors to believe in me, I need to get these employees to believe in me, and then I have to, like, keep the ship sailing and keep everything like in some level of balance while you're freaking out inside. And I think like there's nothing really that can prepare you for that. Like, nothing. Yeah.
I mean, you have to start to learn about HR and stock plans and cap tables.
There's the mechanics of it, right? And that's a huge learning curve. Like, I won't even discount like how much that is, but there's also learning how to be a leader. I mean, I think there's so much pressure that I didn't realize until I was sitting in a C-suite chair of like, no, the buck really does stop here. Like, there is a final decision that has to be made, right? And when you're freaking out and you're like, know that you're wrong, the way that you do in every other job you've ever had, you can't show that. Right, and you have to, and when everyone else is freaking out, you have to be there for them, and it's almost like parenting, I'm guessing, right, where like you don't really have anyone to turn to, like you just have to take care of everybody else, and I think that part, it's heavy.
Yeah, it's the whole paradox of it all.
Right, like it's very weighty in a way that I couldn't have anticipated, I think.
Speaking of weighty things, you know, I joke around about how many times I've failed because I started so early,
right?
You know, like in college, like losing money. It's tough.
Yeah,
it's tough.
It's
like,
brutal.
It's like when your company fails, it's like your baby's failing. You know,
right? Yeah.
What is it like? Like, what is that? You know, like what's the reality of it?
Well, I think. It kind of depends on how you fail, right? I guess there are probably a lot of different flavors. Ours was, we weren't getting enough traction. It was pretty clear that we weren't going to be able to before we ran out of money. And so start planning for an acquisition or what are the other options, right? Like that gets heavy. But what I think it really felt like was I am in a plane crash in slow motion. And like, at some point you know you're gonna crash and you're like, oh, well maybe there's a body of water somewhere, right? And whatever those things are where you might be able to sort of have like, oh, one person might die, but a few people might live, kind of a landing, right? And then eventually you just realize like, no, this is definitely gonna crash. And then you just say, okay, let's nosedive now, like peace out everybody, right? And then some jerk takes the parachute and jumps out and you're like, well, I guess the rest of us are here, right? So there's, I mean, that's my analogy of it. It's like a 6-month plane crash in slow motion. And you're trying to figure out a way out of it, and then you just sort of have to sit there and wait to die. And that's horrible.
It's limbo.
Horrible. Well, at some point you realize you can no longer do anything to affect an outcome. And as a founder, especially, I think it's hard on anyone, but as a founder where you're like, your whole thing is to be able to force outcomes, right? To come up with creative ways to overcome problems, to like throw enough energy or resources or just sheer grit at something and solve a problem. And this, it's not solvable, and you're also not able to shape the outcome, and that's especially acquisitions. Acquisitions are the weirdest, like no one talks about how odd that whole experience is. Like it's so bizarre.
I just went through one with Twitter and it was very, very interesting.
Right.
How do you start to be able to sort of like implement I don't know, certain hobbies or exercises or things in your life that you could start to sort of develop more of a work-life balance as you're building these startups? Mm-hmm. And do you think like that's as important as, I think, like myself, I really actually believe doing some sort of yoga or doing these sorts of things to try to balance it out is really important. How much do you actually think that is an important component?
I think it's incredibly important. I think you need two things. You need your thing, whatever it is, meditation, yoga, running, whatever it is that's your thing that just takes you out of your own head for a little bit. Like for me, I do a very specific type of yoga, right? That like is all about alignment. And so you can't think about anything else and do this type of yoga, right? So it's perfect because it takes me out of my own head, which is the prison, right? And then you also need to be able to have a network, have a support system, and it has to be someone who understands what you're going through. So your current friends, unless all your friends are founders, they're not going to get it, right? And your significant other and your family, they can be supportive up to a point, but they don't get it. Like, you can't just look at them and be like, oh, it's so hard, and they actually understand the weight. Like, I can look at you right now, and we don't even have to talk, right? Like, you know exactly what I'm feeling. You can suddenly feel that weight return, right? Where you're like, oh, I feel kind of heavy, and my stomach feels a little fluttery and everything, right? Because you get that feeling, and so you need those people, and they can't maybe be doing exactly what you're doing, because you also have to be really transparent. You have to have someone that you can just go to with like real problems, and even if they can't give you advice, they can just listen. And that's those two things. Otherwise, you're going to lose your freaking mind. Yeah,
literally. Literally.
Yeah, like gone. Yeah.
What is Silicon Valley culture? Does it even exist? Is there something called Silicon Valley culture?
I think it's evolved, right? Like, I've been here for 18 years, and I've kind of watched it. And I guess I've grown up and changed too, right? Like, in the beginning, it was like, oh, just add .com to your name, right? Like, I started my career at the beginning of the first bubble, right? So that was, and of course, you don't know it's a bubble, so your perspective is really, really, really skewed, right? Like, I think people who've started their career in the past 2 years have that same skewed idea of like, things have always been great, there will always be money, because that's your reality, right? And so when everything went sideways, that really like fell apart. But I think for me, it's about resilience, and it's about a passion. And I think there's a lot of kind of bullshit stuff around it that people like to sort of, bastardize isn't the right word, but like sort of to take this feeling and this concept and then make it like fail fast, right? Like, you can't boil it down to that, right? Like, or it's okay to fail. It is not okay to fail. It's never fucking okay to fail. No one's okay with failing. Maybe there's not as much shame or whatever externally, but as a founder, if you fail, you're a fucking failure. You failed. Right? Like,
and it's painful.
It's painful, and because I'm in Silicon Valley, I don't think it makes it suck any less.
Anxiety, all these things.
Like, so the idea of like, oh, everyone just comes and it's okay to fail. Like, it's not. Right? But maybe I haven't lived in another culture where it's less okay, right? But there's the ideas of Silicon Valley that you see externally, and then there's sort of what I feel like is the reality. I mean, there's a lot of arrogance. There's a lot of, if it's not here, then it doesn't exist. And some of that's somewhat founded, but it's also like sort of self-fulfilling, right? Like, well, if investors say you can't make it unless you're here, and then you move here, then, right, and then you succeed, then it's attributed, right? So, I think there's a bunch of crap, and then I think there's sort of the real feeling of Silicon Valley.
What tips would you give, let's say, an early stage SaaS startup CEO around, hey, I got a little product, how do I go to market?
I mean, my advice to founders usually tends around how to manage yourself being a founder. Like, the getting to market part, I think, is less hard than sort of fighting the demons in your head, right? I think there are a few things, like, you're warned to pick your co-founders carefully, and I knew that going in. I think the thing I needed to make more peace with was that that's just going to change and evolve over time, and maybe not to try to hold on to that and think I have to get it perfect right this second, and to be more honest with yourself about whether things are going right or going wrong. I think the number one thing as a founder is you get a lot of advice from a lot of people, and you should. And then if your gut says none of that's right, then go with your gut.
Go with your gut.
Like 50% of the time, you're probably going to be wrong anyway. So at least be wrong, knowing that you were like true to yourself, because whatever advice you get, they only have a limited amount of information, right? No matter how much you talk to someone about it, no matter how similar the thing is to the thing that they did, and that's why they're giving you the advice, like they don't know. Like they're not living, eating, and breathing your business every day. Only you know, your gut knows. So I think that. And then I think finding that balance, like we were talking about a little bit earlier, right? Of finding your way to,
like, not burning out.
You'll never be calm. I mean, if you were a normal person, you wouldn't be a founder to start with. If you didn't love chaos, if you didn't love like the angst and the like whatever, you wouldn't be there, right? But it's your normal, it's your balance, but there has to be something. Like if you're running on fumes all the time, you know, you're doing everyone a disservice, but yourself the most, right? So that's something that I didn't get for a while. I got it intellectually.
Yeah.
I didn't get it for real.
For real, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I was, you know, mid to late 20s trying to do a MTV local type thing in San Diego.
Right.
It ended up becoming a nightclub promoting company.
Right.
Anyways, that was a long year, let me tell you. But you know, I was so determined. I hit zero, you know, in the bank, and that's a tough place to be. And I came up to San Francisco, and Jim Payne, who ended up becoming the co-founder and CEO at Mopub, he was at Google at the time, was in San Francisco. We were trying to spin up some other thing. I forgot, like toolbars were big. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were trying to do a toolbar. But anyways, I'll tell you that another day.
Back in
I probably
the day.
need a beer for that one.
Yeah.
But I remember living out of my truck. And I had this, you know, 2005 Dodge Dakota with a fiberglass top in the back, and I just saying no. I had no money to get an apartment in San Francisco. I was like in 2008 at this time. I was like, no, I'm not going to give up. And what I realized was that there's no way I could actually build a company from the back of my truck. Like I needed some basic things. Right. The hierarchy
at least
of
a
needs.
hot plate.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what service is for me when you say that.
Right.
Gretchen reminded us of the roller coaster that is this entrepreneurial journey, the ups and downs, the joys and sorrows, and how important it is to get your mind, spirit, and body right for this journey. Until next time, I'm George Soto, and you're watching Startups Unedited.
When I was in high school here, you know, what was the nerds, and the nerds who got no attention, everyone kind of looked the other way, and now we're kind of rock stars and movie stars, and to be honest, I don't like that, and I think it does us a disservice because it's not glamorous. Working hard is not glamorous. Having to fire people because you can't make payroll, there's nothing more unglamorous about that. You know, that sucks, and it's just as hard as it is long, and it's something that if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to want it. Gretchen, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm looking at my notes here because I wanted to ask you a couple.
Do you have
questions.
A picture of yourself?
I do.
Screen?
Well, I took not of my screen, but I took one earlier because I thought the lighting was great. I think I was cruising around somewhere in the marina. Right. And I went into like selfie mode, and then I was like, and then it worked, but then you just saw it. And I don't know if I was that happy with it. But anyways.
Well, I just saw it there. I was like, I've never seen anyone have a picture of themselves on their home screen.
That would be pretty narcissistic. I think
Or just like fun, like I really love this picture.
Or yeah, I know. Or like, I was gonna say, but sometimes when I get sad, I might wanna be like, hey, look, you look so good in that thing. So the fact that girls are not giving me, giving you.
You don't have a puppy.
Yeah. I don't have a puppy.